The trainees suddenly noticed something strange about Martha. She wasn't acting like her usual self, and on top of that, she had even cut her hair. Martha then approached Raon. She told him that she intended to keep the promise they had made before, that the loser would have to follow the winner's orders. After saying that, Martha left, leaving Raon surprised that she was actually willing to listen to him. However, this change in Martha's attitude only applied to Raon, the one who had defeated her. The new year arrived. Although only small changes had occurred, no one expected Martha to continue obeying Raon even after the year turned. After that, Byrne became calmer and took on more responsibility as the coordinator of the trainees. Meanwhile, Runaan's sword became sharper and more refined. As for Raon, he continued risking his life through intense training every day. It had become a part of his routine. Soon, the trainees began to feel even more astonished by Raon. He had managed to master a newly taught technique in less than half a day. Rimmer later reported Raon's achievement to the head of the family. In response, the head of the family informed Rimmer that they would soon be receiving important guests, a delegation from the Owen Kingdom set to arrive in just a few days. The Owen Kingdom was one of the 6 major kingdoms located in the heart of the continent. They were one of Sieghardt's key allies and a kingdom that placed great value on the sword and martial arts. Hearing this, Rimmer immediately asked who would be leading the delegation. The head of the family explained that while Duke Tartan was the official representative, the third prince would also be attending. Since the third prince was close in age to Raon and the trainees, the head of the family instructed Rimmer to properly train the trainees in preparation. Rimmer asked if the delegation would actually visit their training ground. The head of the family confirmed it, saying that the guests specifically requested to observe the swordsman and trainees in action, meaning there could be no embarrassing performances. Hearing that, Rimmer began plotting something. Returning to the training grounds, Rimmer announced to the trainees that they would soon be facing off against the prospective knights of the Owen Kingdom. It turned out that Rimmer had personally visited the prince and invited him to their training ground, rather than letting him visit the other training centers. Rimmer confidently declared that he would show the prince what real swordsmen looked like. Not long after, the knights of the Owen Kingdom arrived, with the prince naturally becoming the center of attention. The prince introduced himself as Greer de Owen. Raon immediately sensed that the prince was strong, unusually so for someone of his age. Among all the knights, Greer stood out the most. Rimmer then asked Raon if he wanted to fight the prince. Without hesitation, Raon answered flatly that he did. Raon also thought it was the perfect opportunity to put his newly learned technique to the test. Since Raon agreed to fight, the others had no choice but to follow suit, and thus a series of 20 matches was arranged. Rimmer instructed everyone to follow Raon's lead in choosing who would fight, and even revealed that he had placed a personal bet with the Owen Kingdom. His entire month's salary was on the line. He threatened the trainees, telling them not to lose. Raon then finished selecting the participants and ordered them to gather information on their opponents before the matches began. Raon also offered a few words of motivation to the other trainees as the leader of their group. He believed the first match would be crucial for boosting everyone's morale, so he chose Martha to fight first. Martha agreed without hesitation and immediately stepped into the dueling arena. Her opponent was a man much taller than she was. He introduced himself as Tars. Despite the clear difference in size, Martha remained confident that she would win. The duel between Martha and Tars began. Watching from the sidelines, the prince thought to himself that Raon's training ground was full of talented individuals, unlike the other training camps he had seen. Meanwhile, the Duke asked Rimmer if the reason he had invited them here was to show off his students. Rimmer responded that this was a rare opportunity for the trainees to face knights from one of the 6 great kingdoms, and he believed it would be a valuable learning experience. Then, Rimmer casually suggested that they place a bet and reward the winners. However, the Duke seemed to look down on Rimmer's trainees and asked if they even stood a chance against the knights of the Owen Kingdom. Rimmer simply replied that he believed in the students he had trained. Returning to the duel, Martha kept attacking relentlessly until Tars's sword finally broke. Tars couldn't believe how strong Martha was. With one final strike, Martha sealed her victory. Raon, observing from the side, was surprised. Instead of becoming softer after their previous battle, Martha's swordsmanship had grown faster and stronger. The matches continued until the 18th duel, where Runaan faced off against Idalia. Idalia openly said that she didn't like Runaan's blank expression and immediately unleashed her aura. Runaan calmly replied that she didn't like fire, and then released her own aura. Their duel began, and their clash created a mist that spread across the arena. Runaan used the mist to move stealthily. Idalia sensed Runaan's presence and tried to strike, but there was nothing there, leading her to wonder if it had all been an illusion. Suddenly, Runaan appeared behind her, sword pointed at her back, and claimed victory in the 18th match. Idalia admitted it had been a great fight, but Runaan ignored her and instead walked straight to Raon, asking if he had been watching her duel. Raon replied that her footwork had improved significantly compared to before. Runaan thanked him and quietly sat down next to him. Next was the 19th duel, featuring Byrne against Sarin. After briefly introducing themselves, they immediately launched into battle. Byrne quickly realized that their skills were very close, meaning that even a slight lapse could cost him the match. The fight was fierce and intense, and eventually both of their swords shattered, resulting in a draw. Byrne stepped down from the arena, frustrated that he couldn't win. However, Raon encouraged him, saying he had done a good job and not to worry. because Raon would win the final match and uphold Sieghart's honor. Raon then entered the arena alongside the prince. The prince quickly sensed that Raon's martial arts skills seemed ordinary and asked Raon if he was a direct descendant of the Sieghart family. Raon answered honestly, he was not. Hearing that, the prince completely underestimated Raon, losing interest in the fight. He didn't like predictable matches and was far more eager to fight Martha, Runaan, or Burin instead. The prince even suggested to Rimmer that after he defeated Raon, he should be allowed to challenge either Martha or Runaan. Rimmer simply smiled and said it was fine, as long as he won. The arrogant prince then ordered Martha and Runaan to prepare, boasting that he would quickly finish his duel with Raon. He also mentioned he wouldn't even bother using his aura to conserve his strength. Meanwhile, the Duke asked Rimmer who that monster was, referring to Raon, because he had barely been able to sense Raon's presence. Rimmer smiled and said, "So you noticed," and added that maybe the Duke should have warned the prince, who was clearly underestimating Raon. The Duke explained that the prince was destined to one day lead the Owen Kingdom and had never experienced defeat before. He believed that this would be a perfect opportunity to teach the prince about losing in a safe environment. Even so, he emphasized, the prince was strong. Even genius swordsmen couldn't defeat him. Rimmer disagreed with that statement and proposed another bet. Whoever lost would treat the other to a drink. The bet was simple. Raon would win within 5 strikes or less. The duel began. Raon immediately closed the distance and attacked. With just a single strike, Raon defeated the prince, leaving the Duke in utter shock. It didn't even take 5 strikes. Raon crushed the arrogant prince in one clean blow. At that moment, the prince realized there was a reason Raon had been saved for the final match. He finally understood. Raon wasn't just talented. He was a true genius. The Duke turned to Rimmer and said, amazed, "He's still just a trainee. How are his footwork and swordsmanship already so perfect?" Rimmer smiled and replied, "That's why I told you, Raon would win." As Raon prepared to leave the arena, the prince called out, insisting that it wasn't over yet. He argued that he hadn't shown his true skills, that if he had fought seriously from the beginning, he could have won. At that moment, Martha interrupted, bluntly telling the prince to accept his loss instead of whining like a spoiled dog. She added that she had tried to be polite, but since he had lost, he should just leave quietly. Delia quickly scolded Martha, telling her to be more respectful toward the prince. But Martha fired back, saying, "He's royalty, and I'm a direct descendant of the Sieghart family. Why should I show him any special respect?" Before the argument could escalate further, Rimmer stepped in to calm everyone down and said they should first hear what Raon had to say. Raon spoke clearly. "There's no reason to continue. The duel is over, and the bet has been decided." Hearing that, the prince finally shouted out that he accepted his defeat and admitted he had misjudged and underestimated Raon. He also confessed that he felt ashamed, but pleaded for one more duel, a serious one, so he wouldn't regret it for the rest of his life. The prince even bowed his head and earnestly begged Raon for another match. Raon hadn't expected the prince to apologize so sincerely. He had thought the prince was nothing more than an arrogant noble. Moved by the prince's humility, Raon agreed to a rematch. One final time. The second duel began. This time, the prince fought with everything he had. And Raon too finally revealed more of his true power. The prince launched the first attack, unleashing a flurry of strikes. Yet Raon calmly defended against every blow without giving an inch. The prince then prepared to unleash a secret technique passed down only to the successors of the Owen royal family. Raon stood ready to receive the attack and encouraged the prince to come at him. He activated the Ring of Fire to strengthen his defense, surprising the prince with the appearance of a golden flame aura. The prince charged forward, and the clash of their swords echoed through the arena. For a moment, it seemed the prince had the upper hand. He managed to push through Raon's aura and saw an opening. But in the next instant, the prince's sword shattered. Raon immediately counterattacked, landing a decisive blow and securing victory once again. Thus, the second duel also ended in Raon's overwhelming win. The prince then thanked Raon and reached out for a handshake, grateful for everything he had learned. He openly admitted his defeat. Raon shook his hand and replied that he too had learned a lot from their duel. The prince asked Raon how old he was, and Raon answered that he was 14. Realizing he had lost to someone younger than himself, the prince smiled bitterly. Then, he handed Raon a special token, a symbol that Greer to Owen, the third prince of the Owen Kingdom, would grant any request made by the bearer. Raon asked why he was being given such a valuable item. The prince explained that, even though he lost, he felt relieved. He had realized something far more important through their fight. With that, the prince turned and left, and Raon also took his leave. Later, the prince reported everything that had happened to the head of the Owen household. He told him he wished to return immediately to put into practice everything he had learned. On the way back, the Duke asked why the prince had revealed the Owen royal family's secret technique. The Duke thought it was excessive and something that should have been kept hidden. The prince agreed that he had gone too far. But the Duke wasn't done. He pointed out that the prince had also handed over a royal relic to Raon. The prince explained that it was simply a token of gratitude for Raon agreeing to a rematch. Besides, Raon had shown techniques worth paying attention to. The prince saw the relic as an investment, Believing that Raon might one day become the strongest in the kingdom, the prince hoped to build a friendship with him, and couldn't help but wonder just how powerful Raon would become the next time they met. Meanwhile, back at the training grounds, the other trainees congratulated Raon on his overwhelming victory. Among them, the head of the Zeekhart household's butler looked on happily, proud to see his grandson recognized by a foreign prince. He rarely saw the head of the household smile, and even less often with such warmth. The head, however, brushed it off, muttering that the old butler must be imagining things. At the same time, the Duke of Owen had delivered some serious news to the Zeekhart household. It seemed the 5 demons had started to move. The scene shifted back to the training grounds. Rimmer gathered the trainees and praised them for their efforts. He then announced that next week they would undergo special training, real combat practice. He warned them to be prepared to shed blood. Apparently, in the southern region of Zeekhart, a group of mountain bandits calling themselves the Snow Tigerclaw had been causing trouble. Originally, they survived by collecting taxes from travelers passing through the mountains, but recently they had grown more violent, stealing from merchants and even killing civilians. The trainees' original mission had been to wipe them out. However, it had now changed. They were tasked with tracking down the bandits and eliminating them because the group had attacked a village, slaughtered its people, and burned it to the ground. Rimmer warned everyone not to let their guard down. These bandits were once well-known aura users. Their departure to the southern region was set for tomorrow afternoon. After the meeting, Runaan stayed behind to continue training for the upcoming mission. But no matter how hard she tried, she felt she wasn't making any progress. She thought about asking Raon for advice, but decided against it, not wanting to bother him. After finishing her practice, Runaan headed home. On the way, someone called out to her. It was her older brother, Syria. The moment she heard his voice, Runaan froze, visibly terrified. She couldn't even speak in front of him. Syria told her bluntly that she was forbidden from participating in any battles or dangerous duels. Hearing those words made Runaan stumble backward, trembling. It turned out that Runaan had a deep trauma from her past. When she was little, she had seen Syria kill her beloved pet squirrel right in front of her. Now, he repeated the same act in front of her, bringing those painful memories flooding back. Runaan's trauma resurfaced violently. Syria leaned in close and whispered that she must not risk her life before the selection day, because in his eyes, Runaan belonged to him. At that moment, Raon arrived, stepping in to protect the terrified Runaan. He stood between them and demanded to know who Syria was. This video ends here, but the story isn't over yet. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next part.